Here in Bahrain for the second round of the Formula One World Championship, and the big question is, can Ferrari hit back after its really poor performance in the Australian Grand Prix? Now, there are lots of questions about what caused Ferrari's lack of performance after a very strong pace in testing. One of those suggestions came from Red Bull Motorsport advisor Dr. Helmut Marko, who said that cooling problems may have restricted the performance. Now, I'm joined by Ben Anderson to talk about Ferrari's problems, and Ben, you asked Vettel about this today, the question of whether cooling was a big issue or not. So what did he have to say about it?
Yeah, spent 20 minutes listening to Seb at a press call in the paddock. He seemed in a very relaxed mood, actually, quite jovial mood for somebody who's coming off the back of a very difficult season and a very difficult first race for his team. He kind of ducked the question, though, of Marko's comments about Ferrari's cooling. He said, they were having some laughs on the plane home from Australia and that Marko was asleep. So he's not really sure when he did this analysis that claims Ferrari were struggling with their cooling. If they are, obviously that's a big question mark coming to a track where, in the desert, the temperatures are going to be much higher, both on the track and ambient. But Vettel did reveal some details of the lessons Ferrari have learned since Melbourne. He says we're not going to get all the answers because ideally you need to go back to the track you've just come from to prove if you've understood everything correctly, and we don't do that for another 12 months. He was talking about Ferrari potentially having lost some straight line speed compared to last year. Obviously, one of the big strengths in the first half of 2018 was the engine. We had Lewis Hamilton, Mercedes talking up Ferrari's engine performance. That tailed off a bit as the season went on. Obviously, there were some clarifications on the rules that Marko mentioned those as well in his comments coming into Bahrain. Vettel was talking about Ferrari having to trim downforce in the second half of last season that boosted their straight line speed. This season's car much stronger in the corners in testing, not so much at Melbourne, and perhaps that trade-off in getting cornering performance is hurting Ferrari's straight line speed. Certainly, he feels that everything's closing up between them, Mercedes and Red Bull, who obviously had a very strong Australian Grand Prix.
And he did seem to suggest that he was confident Ferrari had found some areas where they would improve. So I think he's very confident that Ferrari will be stronger compared to where they were in Australia. He said basically in every area they were losing out in Australia, other than in the fast corners. It just didn't feel like the car he had in Barcelona. He was saying he was very comfortable with the car in Barcelona. It was doing what he was doing. It was responding. It was everything a driver could want from a car. And it looked like that from trackside, and the lap time showed that as well. It didn't do that in Australia. Whether there's an aero imbalance, whether the cooling was a problem, basically nothing seemed to be right. But of course, Australia is an unusual circuit.
Yeah.
It's a bit of an outlier, and we have seen in the past a pattern whereby the gaps and the relative performance in Australia doesn't carry over to the rest of the season. Now, although Vettel said the situation wasn't the same as last year when they struggled in testing, struggled in Australia, and then it wasn't really until they got here to Bahrain that they sorted it out, this time they went really well in Barcelona, then struggled. But the gap, the deficit, 2018 versus 2019 from Ferrari to Mercedes in Australia was very similar, 6.5 to 7 tenths. And then last year we came here and Ferrari locked out the front row and the nearest Mercedes was just over 1.5 off. So this is the question, what will change? I think we can be confident Ferrari will be stronger, but I guess the big question is, will it be strong enough to challenge Mercedes, or will they just be closer?
Yeah, I think the performance last year, Ferrari probably gives Vettel confidence that they can come off the back of a bad first race in terms of pure performance and setup and nail it at this track. The big challenge, though, will be the nature of this circuit. It's more low speed and straight line than it is high speed. Okay, Melbourne doesn't have a huge amount of high speed corners, but in Bahrain you've got that one long corner around the back of the circuit that's basically an extension of the straight. It's mostly about low speed performance and braking.
Traction as well, that'll be a big thing here.
Traction, very important. So it will be a big test of Ferrari's car, whether they have understood the problems from Melbourne and whether they can recapture that feeling that Vettel experienced in pre-season testing at Barcelona. But he seems quite chilled, quite relaxed for a guy who, as I say, is in a team that looks like they're under a bit of pressure and are struggling. So if there are big problems, he's certainly doing a good job of hiding them.
Well, it's really important for Ferrari that they are strong here this weekend. It was interesting, that whole cooling topic that was talked about, because when you did ask Vettel about it, you're right, he was evasive. He didn't say, no, it wasn't cooling. He didn't say, yes, it was a problem. It sounded a bit to me like maybe he's had a conversation he shouldn't have done with Marko about it while on the plane, and he just wanted to kind of sweep it under the carpet. So I do wonder if we've seen that. We've seen teams do that in the past. They get to the first race and they have problems. Actually, Sauber last year was a great example of that. They were really struggling the first few races with cooling, sorted it out. Underlying performance of the car turned out to be really good.
Yeah.
But I think Ferrari will need to be stronger here. They will be really worried if they can't find that performance and at least be within striking distance. That's the big question for them. And of course, Mercedes clearly improved in Australia, and they're really happy. Lewis Hamilton was positive about life. He said that he expected Ferrari to come back, but Mercedes right now, you'd have to say, holds all the aces.
Yeah, well, Vettel was talking about how, they won the first couple of races last season, and that means all the questions are much more positive and nobody's really on your back. But the underlying performance for Ferrari in Melbourne last year wasn't that strong. The extra challenge they have this year is that Mercedes has started really well. Pre-season testing, they didn't look to be totally themselves. They gave themselves a lot of work to do with those two different car concepts. But they started amazingly in Melbourne, surprised themselves, surprised the whole paddock, really. And you don't expect a team that's won so many championships and been so strong over so many consecutive seasons to drop off suddenly at this track. Bahrain has been a strong venue for Mercedes in the past, so we don't expect Hamilton and Mercedes level to drop, and that means that Ferrari won't really get any help from the opposition. They have to find a massive improvement only from themselves if they are to compete for victory with Mercedes this weekend.
And that's going to be a huge challenge for them around here. Historically, Ferrari have been pretty good in Bahrain, so they'll be moderately confident about it, but they need to be close enough to be able to take the fight to them in the race. If they can't, then it's more worrying for the season. Australia could be kind of dismissed as a one-off. Bahrain, a bit more representative, even though the conditions are very hot here. And of course, the other big question is, because remember, Red Bull, Max Verstappen overtook Sebastian Vettel. So the big question is, where do they stack up with Red Bull? And in fact, both Lewis Hamilton and Sebastian Vettel have been talking up the Red Bull performance, or more specifically, Honda.
Yeah, Hamilton's been saying that he reckons Honda are probably only 10 horsepower behind now, which is extraordinary when you consider they were searching for 5-6 times that not so long ago. Vettel backed Hamilton up, really saying that he feels that Red Bull are as fast as anybody on the straights in Melbourne. Obviously, the straights are quite a bit longer here, so it will be a much bigger test of Honda's improvement. But they had a strong race here last year with Toro Rosso. Pierre Gasly raced to fourth. Okay, there was some attrition there that helped him, but they should be feeling quite confident. And the big test for Ferrari could come from behind as well. Really, they want to be targeting Mercedes, striking back and beating them this weekend. But if they have another poor weekend and Mercedes are down the road, this could be shaping up to be more like a 2016 season where they're struggling to hold Red Bull off, who are the coming team. Obviously, we don't want to see that. Ideally, we'd want to see all three of those teams come together and give us an epic battle for the title at the front. But we'll see how things progress. Ferrari certainly are the team with the most work to do among the big three.
Well, Friday practice is going to be really important in terms of the work Ferrari needs to get through. I suspected in Australia, Friday practice wasn't very representative in terms of the gap Ferrari to Mercedes. As it happens, it was. It was just way out of whack with what we saw in testing. So we need to see Ferrari being stronger tomorrow and being happy. If they're chasing their tails on setup, if they go out and the things they think they needed to solve aren't there and they've got a car that doesn't feel like it is, it's going to be a real problem. And, Vettel could feel the car wasn't right in Australia, so he'll want to go out in FP1, and although the conditions aren't really representative because it'll be much hotter, obviously this is a night race and night qualifying, but if he doesn't feel the car under him, he's going to be thinking this is a worry we're going to be chasing to really get a setup nailed here.
Yeah, and he has to be feeling a little bit stressed, even though he's doing well hiding it, looking happy and jolly at the moment, because to lose that feeling in the car, having felt so great from one venue to the other, that's a massive concern when you consider your main rivals, in this case Hamilton and Bottas, also Verstappen, Gasly, if he can get his act together. They're really positive about their cars. Mercedes have made their step between testing and the first race. They're really happy with how things are going. They don't need to search for any answers. Red Bull are coming up fast from behind. Verstappen's never been happier, never looked happier as a Formula 1 driver in his short career. Vettel and Ferrari are searching for something they did have, and now they've lost inexplicably. And one thing Vettel did say that definitely holds true is they think they have some answers, but they really don't know. You can't know without going back to Melbourne, as I said. So they go into this weekend with massive question marks hanging over them, and really needing to find something solid to get their season really going.
Well, the next 3 days are going to be huge for Ferrari. They need the things they think they've understood about the car and that they can change to work, and they need to get on an even keel to be able to at least get close to Mercedes. Maybe if everything works, they could even be on the same level or ahead. But I think Australia changed very much what we expect to see from the competitive order. So Ferrari really needs to do something this weekend, show they've got the performance, or they could be in for a very long, hard season.